Good morning or good afternoon. My name is Dimitri Pesha. I'm Director of Power System Transformation at Agora Energiewende, and I welcome you all today to a webinar, How Market Reforms Can Drive Renewable Energy Growth in Southeast Asia. As you all know, renewable energy are experiencing a massive growth worldwide, and today they generate about 30% of the world's electricity. And if we look at wind and solar power alone, the share is already 13%. In the recent weeks, the International Energy Agency predicted that this share could reach 50% by 2030, with wind and solar power contributing 30%. So in about 6 or 7 years, we expect a massive increase, which is actually needed to align with the tripling of renewable energy targets, which was adopted at the last climate conference, COP28, and which is also needed to align global economies closer to the pathways to net zero emission by the middle of the century. However, this global trend has not yet fully reached Southeast Asia, which is actually lacking behind other regions in the world. And this is somehow paradoxal because several countries in the region are emerging economic powerhouses. They attract a lot of foreign direct investment, and they also possess abundant renewable energy potential. But with the exception of Viet Nam, solar and wind power contribute less than 5% of the electricity mix in most countries in the region. So the question is how to accelerate the development of renewable, how to solve this Southeast Asian renewable energy paradox. And in order to do so, the enabling condition for renewable investment must be refined, but also the power system arrangement, the way the design of the power system is made, must be better aligned with this new policy objective. This will help deliver investment at the pace and scale which is needed, and also facilitate the integration of renewables in the power system, while at the same time enabling a phase down of fossil fuel power, and all of this addressing other economic development priorities in the region. So to tackle these policy challenges, Agora Energiewende, in partnership with NewClimate Institute, ERI and GIZ, has initiated a study under the Clean, Affordable, Secure Energy for Southeast Asia program, the so-called CASE program, which is supported by the German federal government. This study that we will launch today and present you today identify regulatory and market opportunities to scale up variable renewables, and looking specifically at the development in Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines. It has been built on intense stakeholder consultation with the utilities, regulators, policymakers, associations, and also power producers in the region. We will today present this study and then discuss its implication with key experts from the region. The presentation will last about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll have about 45 minutes for a panel discussion where we will address the question from the audience. So without further ado, I will hand over the virtual floor to my colleague, Ernst Kuhnemann. Ernst Kuhnemann is project manager for power system transformation at Agora Energiewende, and he is one of the main authors of this study. So we are very much looking forward to have your presentation, Ernst, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Dimitri, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone here. Thank you very much for joining us today. So indeed, I will be presenting some of the key insights of our newly published report, Electricity Market Designs in Southeast Asia, Opportunities for Renewable Energy Growth. So what we really try to do with this assessment is look into market and regulatory opportunities in the 4 countries of focus to scale up renewable deployment, while also anticipating some of the opportunities to integrate variable supply sources cost effectively. As Dimitri already mentioned, we developed the report with the NewClimate Institute, as well as the Energy Research Institute Thailand. And we worked in close collaboration with our partners in the CASE consortium, in particular, GIZ, who has been involved throughout this project over the past year. So let's start with a quick snapshot of where things stand today. In 2023, wind and solar power accounted for just below 5% of electricity generation in ASEAN. And this average level kind of holds for most of the ASEAN member states, including the countries in focus today. So you can see Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, all well below 5%. And of course, with the exception of Viet Nam, which is well above that after its solar energy boom over the past years. At these fairly low shares, relatively low shares, mobilizing more investments in solar and wind energy is really the key priority. So in the report that we're presenting, and there's many more details in the report itself, the priority or the emphasis we also placed on what arrangements are needed to mobilize more investments, while also keeping in mind these integration aspects. So the good news is that, as Dimitri already mentioned in his introduction, is that the region overall has tremendous potential for a rapid ramp up in wind and solar power. So on the left side, you see a graph with GDP growth. You can see that most of ASEAN's member states are growing by more than 5% per year. And this is accompanied by record foreign direct FDI, foreign direct investment flows. So there's high economic growth. Investors are all keen to be part of this growth trajectory, and there's a lot of business opportunities that are coming with it. Now, of course, this has an impact on the power systems in Southeast Asia. There is a trend of continuous electricity demand growth. And if we look at what happened over the past 2 decades, we've seen that power systems in the regions have almost tripled in size, measured in generation capacity. Now, if you look at the latest scenario outlooks, for instance, from the ACE Center for Energy, what you see is that this generation capacity is projected to continue expanding at least 4-fold towards 2050. And in principle, it's good news because there is a lot of wind and solar energy potential across the region, which you can see on the right side. So here we've put a few numbers to it. This is all in gigawatts, accounting for land constraints. And what you can see that there is massive unemployed potential to ensure the capacity investment needs can be delivered over the coming decades. So we have all these promising growth factors in the region: robust economic growth, high investor interest, high investment needs to deliver the needs for expanding power systems, and high renewable energy resource potential. Yet VRE deployment has been somewhat limited to date. There are very positive signs. Procurement tenders, auctions, procurement routes, they are increasing. More renewables are coming online, but it's just not going as fast or as quickly as what you would expect from a region with this much potential. So that means there is something missing in this already promising outlook, and that is the need for conducive market designs. It will be critical for Southeast Asia, for most of its member states, to consistently provide investment opportunities for renewables, to reduce project and financial risk, and also to put in place new incentives to unlock system flexibility, all aimed at delivering a large renewables build out. So this is exactly the kind of thing that we try to explore in the study that we published today. And we did that mainly along 5 pillars. So these are kind of outcome-based principles for renewables-based transitions. And what we did is essentially assessing where do things stand today, what is going well, and where are there opportunities for improvement based on these 5 outcome-based principles, being investment certainty for renewables, system flexibility, system adequacy, phase out, phase down pathways, and affordability. So if we look at the overall market design landscape in ASEAN, what we're seeing is that the single buyer model dominates in the region. So there are 2 competitive systems, Singapore and in the Philippines. Besides those 2, all other power systems in ASEAN take a different form, one form or another of the single buyer model. And they usually differ in the degree of unbundling, utility unbundling, and the level or degree of competition that has been introduced into the system. But they all have in common this centralized arrangement where a utility procures new capacity, purchases all energy, and sells it to consumers. Here you see an overview of the market arrangement of Indonesia. So Indonesia has an integrated single buyer model, which is closest to the vertically integrated utility model. Single buyer activities in Indonesia are integrated within PTPLN. So it means PTPLN is responsible for procurement, purchase, sale, as well as system operations. And it purchases energy from independent power producers through long-term power purchase agreements, which is a common feature of single buyer systems. End users are benefit from subsidized tariffs in one way or another. And in Indonesia, there's limited scope for market reform, having to do with its development pathway over the past half century, more or less. As you may recall from the previous slides, is that Indonesia has a very high solar energy potential. But so far, the deployment of solar power is fairly low, below 1%, accounting for less than 1% of overall electricity generation. This low share comes despite major system expansion overall. So over the past decades, we have seen in Indonesia a massive expansion in generation capacity. And herein we see lies an opportunity to really replicate the de-risking instruments, the investment model that has been applied to conventional assets for VREs, mainly through conducive offtake contracts, a larger procurement pipeline, and less restrictive local content requirements. If we take a closer look at Thailand's system, we see a slightly different form of system organization. There's not one utility, there are three state-owned utilities, one TSO EGAT, and two DSOs, MEA and PEA, which distribute and sell energy to end consumers. Like Indonesia, there's a long-term PPA arrangement in place. There are no wholesale markets of the sort, so you could say it is kind of a long-term contract market. Key development that happened in Thailand over the past year is the agreement of introducing corporate PPAs. So a mechanism has been approved and it is yet to be introduced over the coming period. Renewable energy tenders in Thailand usually count on a lot of subscription. There's high demand for new projects, but tenders so far have somewhat been infrequent. So there's a real opportunity for Thailand to scale procurement while on the side also introducing reforms to use its gas fleet more flexibly. Viet Nam is an unbundled single buyer or employs an unbundled single buyer system. So here is the state utility EVN, which is legally unbundled. It operates a cost-based pool market. There's a separate single buyer entity, the EPTC, which you can see on the left side of the slide. And through the cost-based pool market, EVN purchases energy on a day-to-day basis and uses that for the dispatch of energy resources. Vietnam stands slightly apart from the other countries in that it has a very detailed market design roadmap in place. So there are plans to transition from the current market model to a fully competitive pool market. And this comes with a key opportunity for build-own transfer assets to be fully integrated in the short-term market. So these build-own transfer assets currently indirectly participate in the wholesale market. They are contracted under PPAs, and with the implication that their operational flexibility is not fully utilized. With the ongoing market design transition, there's an opportunity to have them exposed to short-term market dynamics to better use that operational flexibility, which will be important for Vietnam as it is already looking to integrate its variable renewable energies into the system. The last system in focus is the Philippines. It has a restructured system with market competition, fully unbundled, a gross pool market that co-optimizes energy and reserves. The Philippines is one of the few, if not the only country in ASEAN that has a fully competitive procurement mechanism for renewables. It's been using its green energy auction procurement program to mobilize investment in renewables and bring more projects to completion. And it's been fairly successful to date and could indeed serve as a blueprint for other countries in the region. The main key message about the Philippines that sprang out for us in this report while doing the assessment is that it combines a mandatory gross pool market along with a bilateral contracts market with delivery obligations. These two markets interfere and have resulted in some market distortions that may need to be addressed in the future as more renewables come online and are having to be integrated. There are two routes for the Philippines to do so. It could either move to a fully central dispatch model, converting bilateral PPAs into financial contracts, or it could move to a self-dispatch model with a net pool voluntary market. So what most of the systems in focus, or what all the systems share, is are challenges with respect to renewables deployment that have to do with one or several of the items you see here on the right side of the slide. Utility business model may not be fully in shape for a rapid VRE build out, which can be reflected in limited incentives for cost optimization, an overprocurement of baseload capacity, and also constraints in building out the network more quickly to keep up with the needs for integrating new supply. System operations may need adjustments. This applies less to the Philippines, which already applies short dispatch intervals and greater flexibility to update forecast and update dispatch schedules. And then contractual arrangements for the baseload fossil fuel fleet in order to ensure that the existing capacity can be used more flexibly. This is a key thing that we have observed in all four systems of focus. Then on the renewable investment side, there's typically a need for bigger tenders for renewables and more transparency in the procurement process itself. And there's a need to open up new investment opportunities. So not just relying purely on utility procurement, but also looking into opportunities for bilateral contracting and fully exploiting the potential for on-site investments such as rooftop solar. So a key finding of our assessment is that indeed the procurement pipelines will need to dramatically increase in the coming years if countries are, want to be on track to fully decarbonize over the coming decades. There are very positive developments. The Philippines awarded more than 5 gigawatts of renewables over the past 2 years, and so did Thailand with high participation. Of course, Vietnam added a lot of renewables, a lot of wind, and even more solar over the past years. Although deployment is currently on halt as it is seeking to address some integration challenges in the system. And Indonesia is well below its peers on that front. What we're seeing is that this momentum should be continued and scaled up further. So there's a need to scale up utility procurement of renewables while diversifying and opening more investment opportunities through corporate PPAs and on-site investment. In order to do so, in order to dramatically scale up renewable energy procurement, countries will need to use conducive renewable energy PPAs to ensure that utilities can really mobilize all these investments and can capitalize on the high investor readiness of the countries. What we have observed in the assessment is that fossil fuel assets in the countries typically benefit from more or better de-risking measures than renewables. This is typically reflected in two key concepts. That is, fossil assets, they typically benefit from purchase guarantees or capacity payments or both. And these aspects are very critical in reducing the investment risk of the project. Now, VRE plans, VRE projects, they may benefit from priority dispatch. Nonetheless, they will typically face some degree of volume risk and or price risk. And on top of that, they're not compensated for any curtailed hours. So what this comes down to is that the risk and return allocation for renewables versus fossils is not levelized, is not equal in any of the four systems. So one thing that we're suggesting is that it could actually be worthwhile for countries to consider adopting pay-as-produced PPAs for renewables, as these come with two critical clauses, that is an offtake guarantee and a fixed price. which together would then ensure stable revenue flows for renewable energy projects, reduce risk, reduce capital costs, and over time yield lower energy tariffs. So some contractual adjustments will be necessary on the renewable side, but the same holds true for the fossil fuel fleet. As more renewables come online, flexibility needs of the system will increase, and power system planners and utilities will need to look at what system flexibility sources they have already available and which ones they will need to procure over time. The good thing is that while fossil fuel fleets are pretty large in all 4 countries, they also come with some operational flexibility that can actually deliver a very critical role in integrating renewables. The key barrier at the moment is that the long-term PPAs for fossil fuel power plants currently in use do not allow that operational flexibility to be used cost effectively. This is an issue particularly in Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines, where the contractual clauses also impact the dispatch efficiency, and to some extent also for Indonesia, where it will mostly have an impact on the costs at which renewables can be integrated. In all 4 of the countries, however, contractual renegotiation will have to be a priority as more renewables come online in order to really make best use of the flexibility sources that are already available in the power systems. Another major thing that came up in the study is that there has been a tendency to over-procure baseload power in all 4 of the systems. On the left side, you see the current reserve margins in the 4 countries of focus. And this is mainly a result of an incentive for utilities to procure capacity and meet rapid demand increases without interruption. However, utilities do face fewer incentives for cost optimization, and together this has led to a tendency of overprocurement. In order to tackle that, fossil fuel fleets will need to be reorganized to some extent. On the one hand, to create market space for renewables, and on the other hand, to also accommodate variable output and be able to operate more flexibly. So what we are proposing is for utilities to consider reorganizing their fossil fuel fleets according to the system value fossil fuel assets can provide as more renewables come into the system. Essentially, this requires, or this involves a 3-pronged strategy where fossil assets would be assigned one of 3 transition routes, with older, least efficient assets being retired early, involving early termination of PPAs. A second segment of the fleet would be earmarked to be placed in a strategic reserve. And this has the benefit of reducing their operational costs to a minimum, directly creating space for VRE deployment, while also ensuring backup supply in case of stressed system conditions. And again, this will also involve a renegotiation of PPAs. Then a third segment of the fleet could be repurposed to provide flexibility services as more renewables come into the system. Here it is worthwhile to explore the extent to which contractual reform may already be able to unlock that flexibility without before going into the need for technical retrofits, which of course involve additional capital expenditures and thereby would also prolong the life cycle of these assets. We think there's a real opportunity for contractual reform to play a role in a more flexible use of the fossil fuel power fleet. But again, it will also require contractual reform, where you could think of lower minimum take obligations in PPAs, possibly the introduction of a ramp service premium, the introduction of ancillary service procurement, and reformed capacity payment structures. So what this comes down to is that in fact, countries can really get firmly underway with very targeted measures, and this does not need to involve profound market design reforms. So the most important thing is that VRE procurement pipelines are massively scaled up in order to ensure long-term certainty for investors. This should then be complemented with de-risk renewable energy PPAs, as mentioned before, to mitigate risk and also reduce capital costs, and really ensure that this investor readiness can translate into the mobilization of capital into renewables. On the third hand, it's important to open up new investment opportunities for countries to move forward with the introduction of corporate PPAs, as is already ongoing in Vietnam and Thailand, and in parallel mitigate barriers to rooftop solar investment, which in some form or another is still prevalent in all four of the countries. On the conventional, the fossil fuel side, it will then be important to reform existing PPAs for flexibility, embedded in a broader power system transformation strategy that reorganizes fossil fuel fleets according to their system value. I will stop there, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions as they come in.
Thanks a lot, Ernst, for this very comprehensive presentation of the key insight of the report. The report is indeed very long and with a lot of details. We haven't had the chance to cover everything, but I think you provide us here a very good overview. I note there is some topic we haven't addressed yet so much in detail, including the question of grid development, which is also an important priority to ensure the pipeline of project can be connected to the system, and also the question of affordability and tariff reform, which ultimately will provide policy support to the energy transition while ensuring that costs for consumer remain in tolerable ranges. I see one or two short questions already coming to us, and I will ask one to you and then open the panel or bring the panel on board and spin some of the questions we get also to the panel. But here first, a question from Rena Kuwahata from the IEA. Nice you could join us here, Rena, today. Regarding the different market models that you have presented at the beginning of your presentation on the 4 countries. And the question is, in your view, do we have in the short term some of these market models which are more conducive to drive participation of the private sector for renewable energy investment? So this would be first question. And the second one for you, Ernst, is what about the cross-border integration agenda there is in the ASEAN region, a willingness to integrate better the power system? Does it require one fully harmonized market model to incentivize this electricity trade between countries, or is there a way to harmonize at minima some of the market components?
So I'll start with the second question, and then you would like me to address the first one as well, or that's for the panel?
Yeah, you can also address the first one.
Okay. On the second question, I don't think that will be necessary. There are many experts working on this topic on a daily basis. And I think one thing that has come out of the ongoing work on APG is that it's well possible for countries with diverging market designs to take part in a common regional market that would essentially serve for regional surplus and excess trade. The benefit of that, of course, is that you can balance your system over a much greater area. And also provide thereby minimize the risk of curtailment for renewables, potentially even reduce your reserve requirements for balancing capacity. So the APG comes with many opportunities, but also very steep investment requirements. From a market design perspective, it is perfectly possible to create a new regional market structure as an additional layer on top of the national market systems. In terms of private participation, one observation that we have based on the assessment is that private participation is perfectly possible in any of the systems. It just depends on the amount of procurement rounds are being opened in public tenders. One key difference that we have observed is the investment avenues. All 4 systems make use of utility procurement, which involves the participation of the private sector. When it comes to corporate PPAs, things have been more in the lux, so to say. None of the four countries have so far really exploited the opportunity for bilateral contracting to play a role in a much greater deployment of renewables. Now, this is changing in Vietnam and Thailand, and that's quite significant because it actually involves a gradual shift away from the single buyer model, because the moment you introduce bilateral contracting, there is in effect no longer a single buyer of energy, but there will be multiple buyers of energy and electricity. In the Philippines, corporate PPAs or bilateral contracting is already happening, but it hasn't been used to a great extent to deploy renewables. So there the market regulations do allow for it, but there should arguably be a bit more focus on how it can actually play a role in meeting the country's renewable energy targets over the coming decades.
Thanks a lot, Ernst, for this clarification on these 2 points. Let me now call the panel, and some of the questions you're asking will be brought to the panel directly. So first, I'm happy to welcome Alberto Bert Dalasong, who is Energy Transition Advisor at the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Cities, ICSC, which is one of the partners of the CASE project. Bert, you can switch on your camera. And Bert has over 30 years of experience in the energy sector, with a particular focus on renewable energy development, national energy planning, policy formulation, and he served as Director for Energy Planning in the DOE, Department of Energy in the Philippines in the past, where he was a pioneer in geothermal steam pricing, electricity cost and pricing structure, among other things. And Bert is also former president of the Biomass Renewable Energy Alliance and was appointed by former President Duterte as a member of the National Renewable Energy Board, representing private developers. We are very happy to have you on board, Bert. I'm also calling Marilista Citraningrum, so-called Citra. I hope I pronounced your name properly, Citra. Is a senior analyst at ISR, Institute for Essential Service Reforms, which is another of the CASE partner from Indonesia. Citra is specialized in energy access, solar policy, and strategic stakeholder engagement. And on a daily basis, she manages the Sustainable Energy Access Program of ISR. Citra is actually a PhD from chemical engineering with a focus on environmental management she received from the Taiwan Tech Institution. Welcome, Citra, on the panel today. Then I'm calling Phimsupa Kokchang, who is a researcher at the Energy Research Institute, ERI, in Bangkok, and Deputy Director of the Environment Development and Sustainability Program at Chulalongkorn University in Thailand. Phimsupa has been actively engaged in solar energy policy and economics with a focus on distributed power generation and regulation around the energy transition. She's bridging the work between policy and innovation to advance sustainable energy transition in Southeast Asia and find scalable solutions for the region. Welcome, Phimsupa. And last but not least, I'm calling Thuy Pui Ngoc, who is Senior Energy Advisor for the GIZ project, promoting the transition of the energy sector in Vietnam. Thuy has more than 16 or even 17 years of experience in legal and policy advice and development in the energy sector in Vietnam. Thuy worked previously for various departments of governmental authorities, including ERAF, so the Electricity Regulatory Authority of Vietnam, under the MOIT, Ministry of Industry and Trade of Vietnam. She also worked for the Commission for the Management of State Capital, and she has important expertise in policy advisory, legal compliance, project management, and regulatory development for the Vietnam energy transition. I'm very glad to have you all today here, and I would like to actually organize this discussion in 3 main topics that have been highlighted by Ernst. We'll spend about 10-15 minutes per topic, and I will bring the question from the audience on these different topics. The first one will be about variable renewable energy investment, so how to ensure investment in the generation capacities. The second one will be more on the integration of renewables, what needs to be done in the system to ensure we have actually sufficient flexibility and hosting capacity. And the last one will be around the question of coal and restructuring basically the fossil fuel assets. And I will start with you, Phimsupa, for Thailand, because I think we can say that 2024 has been an important year of change for Thailand, right? In terms of energy policy landscape, also more broader policy development, new government, new PDP, power development in the pipeline, and so on. Could you run through for us quickly about these changes and what do you think they imply for Thailand's renewable energy outlook for the coming years?
Thank you for inviting me for this webinar. Yes, absolutely. For Thailand 2024 has totally been a year of change for Thailand energy landscape. The shift we have seen, starting with changing in government, have led to significant new policy, as you mentioned, especially the new drafted Power Development Plan or PDP 2024, as well as the AEDP, Alternative Energy Development Plan, Gas Plan, Oil Plan, and also Energy Efficiency Plans. Especially for the PDP plan, is focused on expanding capacity and set an ambitious goal of achieving 51% of renewable by 2037. For the key reform are clearly aimed at accelerating renewable energy integrations. And one of the most impactful development has been the introduction of the TPA or the third-party access. With TPA will allow the private sector's entity to engage directly in the renewable energy procurement through direct PPAs. This shift comes at an ideal time as the high demand for clean energy at the private sector, like data center and other fast growing industry that are prioritizing renewable energy for operating sustainability. So for these changes indicate very promising outlook for renewable in Thailand, with greater private participation and aim to diversify procurement options like through the PPA, but it's still it's a draft idea, not have the detail yet. Thailand try to attract investment like from foreign direct investment, especially like data center. We have just signed a contract with the Google to build data center and cloud regions in ASEAN. And also in the updated PDP also include essential provision for energy storage system and also demand response program, which crucial for managing intermittency and support system reliability, but still have some regulatory challenges remain this reform, but we believe that this reform paving the way for more dynamic and renewable-driven energy system to be more attractive for foreign investors and to strengthen Thailand's capacity to achieve ambitious clean energy goals.
Thanks a lot, Phimsupha. Just a very short follow-up on the question of the procurement mechanism, because Ernst mentioned earlier in his presentation that Thailand has actually developed tendered about 5 gigawatts, if I remember correctly, of renewable energy in 2022. Yeah. What is expected in this context of tendering new capacity in the future? You mentioned the DPPA, but what about this more centralized procurement processes?
Yes, for the 5 gigawatt tenders is already implemented in 2022 under the FIT program for 2025 to 2030. For the new tender round, which is already released on October 8th. For the second round, also they try to have more potential to scale up utility procurement by refining selections criteria and building on the readiness of the past applicants, like the ERC outline this framework, especially for the fuel-free renewables, focus on solar, ground-mounted solar, and wind energies. So for the second tender round, the additional procurement target is 2,180 megawatt, divided into category 600 megawatt reserved for wind and 1,580 megawatt for ground-mounted solar.
Yes. Yeah. So, thank you for this, Phimsupha. So planning process in motion in Thailand with new mechanism to ensure procurement will be scaled up. Bert, I would like to come to you. What about the Philippines? The Philippines had introduced a couple of years ago, and you may have been actually also involved in your former function in that, in the green energy auction program, which I think has been quite successful in bringing more renewables in the Philippine power system. At the same time, there is this policy success, but there is also challenges in scaling up renewable deployment in the country. And could you tell us where Philippines should now put its focus for scaling up renewables, and where potentially this green auction program success could be a potential blueprint for other ASEAN member states?
Thank you very much, Dimitri. I think that the Green Energy Auction Program started by the DOE 2 years ago will continue. We have Green Energy Auction rounds 3 and 4 already in the planning stages. And I think that this year there will be a round 3 issued by the DOE. But I'd like to focus on a recent conference that I attended in the last 2 days. There is a conference on what we call the renewable portfolio standard, focusing on the ability of distribution utilities in the Philippines to contract for variable renewable energy capacity. I think that, as correctly pointed out by Ern, the DUs, distribution utilities, have not been quite successful in contracting for variable renewable energy. They've tried, a few of them, hasn't been successful. So this is the reason why there is this conference now sponsored by the DOE, on how best to address those difficulties of distribution utilities. I'm hopeful that all of this will lead to better power procurement processes at the distribution utility level. Please note that in the Philippines, we have over 120 distribution utilities, some of them very small. So it's quite challenging to get everyone on board on power procurement for variable renewable energy. But the conference I just attended is a start for doing so.
Thanks a lot, Sobert, for this focus also on distribution grid challenges and how to bring installation connected at this level through various mechanisms. Pim Supa just mentioned the question of corporate PPA in Thailand. Is it also a mechanism which is discussed in this specific context you just raised, or more globally in the Philippines, to come in parallel to other instruments to promote large-scale renewables? So connecting basically a consumer with a producer through this type of mechanism. Bert, this question was for you. I'm not sure you understood what I meant. So regarding the corporate PPAs, is it something that it is also discussed in the Philippine context to introduce corporate PPAs for renewable projects driven by, for example, demand from data centers or other big corporates? Oh, we cannot hear you, Bert. You're still muted.
Yeah, sorry. I tried to get into a quiet corner where I am. But yes, corporate PPAs are being discussed. I am aware of several companies that have an aspiration to have 100% renewable, some of them the largest industrial entities in the Philippines, including the largest steel company. Those are being discussed. I think the challenge is to have proper integration of these new renewable energy capacities in the system. Today, solar and wind, variable solar and wind, only account for about less than 4%. And there is a concern for integration of these technologies. However, there is a past recently concluded USAID study that our grid can really accommodate 50% variable renewable energy. So I think that there's apprehension, but certainly there is the interest to do more corporate PPAs with renewable energy.
Thanks a lot, Sobert. Moving to Vietnam, Thuy, if I may ask you a question. Vietnam has been perceived as really a pioneer in the region in terms of renewable energy uptake with the boom of solar PV and to some extent wind between 2018 and 2022. Things have been stopped. And from what I understand, there is a draft policy on the way to try to give a new momentum and structure the market growth aligned with the basically ambitious long-term target of Vietnam power system transformation. Can you tell us a little bit where we stand and what new procurement mechanism may look like for renewable energy support?
Yes, thank you, Dimitri, for the question. Actually, as you mentioned, Vietnam has witnessed a booming in renewable energy installed in the period from 2018 to 2021, thanks to the FIT mechanism. Stop and go policy approach to renewable energy policy has created uncertainties among the investor and hinder renewable energy investments in the expiration of the FIT regime. So what to do next. The government have takes about 2 years to issue the new power development plan, which is provide the legal framework and also the expected target and capacity for the development of renewable energy. So it differs from previous power development plans when we cannot find the exact the name of the projects in the list. Instead of that, we have the capacity of renewable energy allocated to the provinces, and to create a base for the procurement process, which is introduced and under preparation right now. The Vietnam is not preparing, actually is the process of amending the electricity law, which introduced the procurement process of energy power projects. Actually is under review by National Assembly and is soon will be published in the maybe second quarter of 2025. But rather than that, actually recently, to ensure the cost efficiency, we are moving forward from fixed to competitive auction-based model. Recently, the Vietnamese government just issued the a new decree, which is detailing the implementation of bidding law for investor development on land-based investment projects, which includes renewable energy projects. The procurement mechanism when using the electricity price as the key criterion in the bidding process. So the aim is to lower the power purchase cost for the whole system, and according to that, the Ministry of Industry and Trade is currently developing a specific guidance to standardize the bidding documentation, providing guidance regarding the criteria to select the investor, and evaluation criteria tailored to characteristic of the energy projects. So due to the urgent the procurement procedure to implement the power development plan and to trigger the renewable energy investment in Vietnam after 2 years hold on. So the new policy actually is under the fast track process. It's in public consultation, and it will be soon issued by the Ministry of Industry and Trade. The selection criteria for the investor will include the technical evaluation covering the project location, scan timelines, to preliminary total investment, special organization, construction phasing, key technical requirements, and the most important thing is about the proposed electricity price standard. So even supposed to be a two-phase, not two-phase, two-step procurement, and it different with the initial phase of Thailand procurement that used the fit as the criteria for to attract the investor. Vietnam applied the competition among the tariff selling to the buyer, and the procurement is assigned to provincial government to handle that. Actually, from my point of view, the new dossiers of the procurement process and guidance are quite, how to say, simple, because it hasn't been tailored to reflect the difference of characteristic of different kind of fuel or kind of resources. So we have the same requirement or same tender dossier requirement of information and selection to apply for on-kind renewable energy resources. I think that cannot, effectively, reflects the true cost of the investment process. And secondly, as I mentioned, the procurement is assigned to the provinces, who hasn't been, assigned to do selection of investor so far with their big projects or something like that. And that's why they have a lot of questions to the MOIT to request about how we select the projects, what's the criteria that we can do to select from this location rather than the other location or something like that. Because in the past, Vietnam has the projects go along with the precise locations and on kind of approve technical ECB for the projects that it's a new approach. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Thuy, for this very comprehensive answer. And just very shortly on this last point you raised, because I understand the policy objective of the mechanism is really to reduce cost of generation of renewable, basically, project. But what about other policy objectives, including the one you just mentioned? So having a system-friendly integration of renewables. How can it be done? Through which type of mechanism? And we know the grid development is really lagging behind in Vietnam. But what about also other objectives, like, for example, industry policy objectives? Is there any, like there is in Indonesia, for example, local content requirement discussion, how to ensure that a supply chain can also be developed in Vietnam? Is it part of the auction design discussion, or is it really, as you said, a simplistic or simplified mechanism to ensure for most reduction of costs?
Yes, actually, the local content requirements hasn't incorporated in the requirements for the tender procurement process yet. Actually, I think somehow it's more attractive to the foreign investor because they don't have to abide by the requirements of local content or something like that. But it doesn't mean that we do not consider incorporating the local content requirement to support the industrial and supply chain in Vietnam. We have study focusing on the capacity of the industrials in Vietnam about the support the energy sector, and we are considering to try aims at the local content requirement for the offshore wind projects, because we have some advance in the oil and gas exploration that actually we can apply with the offshore wind projects energy sector. So right now it hasn't been incorporated and introduced yet, but I think it soon will be a compulsory part in the procurement process.
Thanks a lot, Thuy, for this answer. Let's move to Indonesia to finalize this first round of discussion around the procurement of renewable. And I would like Citra to ask you, Indonesia is not currently what we could say a front runner in renewable energy development, despite amazing actually potential specifically for PV. What do you think should be done? What are the 3 priorities that now we need to implement in Indonesia to have actually a scaling up finally of renewable?
Yeah, thank you, Dimitri. I saw what you did. Yeah, you put me at the last because we are the less progressed country in the region. We realized that Indonesia has been lagging in terms of renewable energy development, and it's due to a couple of reasons: unsupportive policy framework and also lack of long-term clarity for the renewable energy procurement. So I really like it in the report that Ernst has been presenting, that this kind of clarity is very, very much needed, especially for long-term investment, because we cannot attract investment in renewable energy unless there is a clear, solid target of government for renewable energy along with the supportive policies. So the first clarity on the renewable energy procurement must be followed also by the increasing ambition of renewable energy. It's also noted in the report that we are lagging behind our renewable energy target. By 2025, we aim to have 20%, but because of the slow development, we will revise it into 17 to 19% by the same year in 2025. So instead of making a lot of policy and support to achieve the actual target, which is 20%, we chose to lower the target. So then we can be quote unquote realistically achieve the renewable energy target of our government. And the third thing that I would like to say is that coal power plant has always been a problem for Indonesia. We are currently in a coal lock-in, so it is naturally difficult for renewable energy and especially variable renewable energy to come into the system. So it is important to reduce the use of coal-fired power plants and to retrofit the existing coal power plants to operate flexibly so that the variable renewable energy can enter the grid. And the last thing, if we see about the energy system in Indonesia, is that we would like to see the increased efficiency of the energy system through electrification of industrial and transport sectors. That's why we can also accelerate the emission reduction through the substitution of fossil energy needs with renewable energy in the power system.
Thanks a lot, Chitra. And I didn't put you last because Indonesia was actually maybe less on track with development. It's a bit worrying, though, to hear that targets are reduced, even though it's more important to have actually realistic deployment than just to have long-term targets, which will never be reached. But still, I would like, before going to the question of coal that you mentioned, we'll address later on, and flexibilization overall, because Bert mentioned the green energy auction program, which has been important in the Philippine development of renewables. Do you think something like this could play a role also in Indonesia?
Yes, I believe that green energy procurement, such as what's implemented in the Philippines and also in other countries, it could benefit Indonesia in two ways. First is to reduce the cost and also to boost investors' confidence, because only with that we can show that renewable energy procurement in Indonesia is attractive, and then they can plan ahead. They can optimize the whole long-term planning process and also the scale of the plans coming to the system so that you can bid the best price for it. And the second thing is to also benefit Indonesia in terms of capacity planning and development of the grid. Because with more variable renewable energy coming into the system, we must parallelly update also our grid and transmission to ensure that energy reliability maintains as it is and to provide high quality energy access. Now, I would like to add that right now Indonesia is, in the past 4 years, we have been trying to increase the competitiveness of the electricity procurement through the equity partner bidding, so to say, in which PLN subsidiary wants to find equity partner to share the project development, which has two sides of things, because first, yes, it's first more interest from private sectors to come to bid for big scale renewable energy project, especially solar energy. But on the same time, it puts a really high risk on the investors, because the terms of the equity partners for shareholder loans, meaning that PLN will not put a lot of capital into it, and the private sector must foot the bill, and it means that more risk for them and less bankable for them as well.
Oh, thanks a lot, Chitra. Very interesting. We would have a lot of follow-up question to deep dive, but let me move also to another topic which you all actually address more or less, which is this question of basically integration of renewables. And you just mentioned now the grid. I'm looking back to Vietnam, to you, Thuy, because we all know that the grid has been a real bottleneck to actually the development of renewables. But more globally, with such a high share of renewables now in the system, which is becoming transformative for the Vietnam power grid, how do you see regulatory and economic incentives to better plan and operate this flexible resource for Vietnam? So the grid is one of them, but what about the thermal generators, the mobilization of pumped hydro storage, which is also an important resource in Vietnam? Can you tell us something around this?
Yes, actually, regarding the pump storage in Vietnam, we have only the first projects, and which is under the preparation. It hasn't been, it hasn't been start the construction yet, and we are planning for that. It's a very great solution to improve the flexibility of the grid and also provide the reserve for the system. But actually, I think that it will take a few more years to have it come into the operation. Rather than that, to improve the, to effectively use the low-cost renewable energy available to the system, we also to try to invest the smart grid system, and also to include build up the very first batch storage to back up for the system also. Right now, but all the projects are still in the initial phase, and we still have to wait for a few more years to have it in operation. Rather than that, how to say, the major obstacle of Vietnam is a great concentration and containment risk due to the limitation, and we cannot transfer the renewable energy generated from the south, which is a center from the south, to the north center, the north center in the north of Vietnam. So in order to handle that, the government has focused on expansion of the grid capacity by building up the transmission line, which is also very in a very short period of time. So in 2024, we have the new 500 kV online last August, and it doubles the capacity to transmission from the central to the north of Vietnam, and it's have a lot in deployment of the renewable energy resources in the south and transfer it to the north, and also other solution that we try to apply and to increase the flexibility of the system, the grid, is also the demand response program. So EVN is working hard on that, and it allows the large scale user to adjust demand during the high renewable energy periods, help with the balance load and reducing containment risks. So that the three keys tools that we are working right now. We also try to open the potential of the third-party grid investment from private sector. Actually, it's already allowed by the law, but it still need further guidance and legal framework for to implement it in the reality, like the tariff restructure, transmission tariff restructure, because it's right now it's quite low and it's not profitable for the private sector. And also for the definition of what part of the transmission line that can be assigned to the private sector to develop, because the backbone 500 kV, for example, is the monopoly owned and operated by the government. And so more regulation will be needed to explore the capacity of the grid and to improve the flexibility of the grid to deploy more renewable energy in the system.
Thanks a lot, Thuy. Indeed, very strong priority on grid, attracting investment and ensuring that the cost recovery mechanism will be adequate while not increasing tariffs too much on end consumers. A strong challenge that we see in all the countries in the region. But coming back and also reflecting on some of the questions we have from the audience on thermal generators as a potential provider for flexibility. We had actually Ernst described potential renegotiation of PPAs to operate more flexibly thermal assets. I'm looking at Thailand, Pimsupa, because Thailand has an important gas fleet, right? And in principle, this has a potential for integrating larger of renewables, but we know that minimum take obligation in PPAs are holding back this flexibility potential. So has there been any discussion on renegotiating the PPA to integrate this flexible operation? What are actually the discussion within EGAT or with EGAT for tackling this issue? And do you see potential adjustments?
Yes, for Thailand gas fleet, which is primarily managed by EGAT, has strong potential for support greater VRE integration like solar and wind due to its flexibility to ramp up or down with renewable output. But however, as you mentioned and Ernst already mentioned in the presentations, Thailand has a limit for gas fees about minimum take obligation in PPA which limit these flexibilities. As EGAT must purchase a fixed amount of electricity from gas plants regardless of the renewable availabilities, which lead to cost efficiency and reduce VRE indications. So if talk about the current step, EGAT has taken some steps to address some of these challenges, but still slow progress. This effort include already mentioned in the PDP, like expanding demand response program and enhancing grid infrastructure to better accommodate VRE, also maintain system security. The updated PDP also include a battery energy storage system to help balance supply and demand, which indirectly support the gas fleet's flexibility by absorbing excess renewable generation. However, minimum take contractual obligations still remain significant barriers as curtailing gas generation when renewable output is high become costly under these terms. If we're looking ahead, the potential for EGAT to further optimize gas flexibility by renegotiating these minimum take commitment and adopting a more flexible PPA structures. Like, for instance, like we already recommend in the report, shipping some gas contract to capacity payment rather than minimum offtake requirement could allow gas plant to serve more peaking assets, ramping up during low VRE production and standing by when high renewable productions. And lastly, expanding ancillary service market could reward flexibility from gas plant, battery storage, and demand side management that could reduce reliance on gas as a base load source. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Pim. Super interesting discussion. You just mentioned ancillary markets. I'm looking at you, Bert. What needs to happen in your view? You mentioned the distribution grid challenge of the Philippines, which is specific, but what needs to happen to make this power system more flexible in the Philippines, broadly speaking? Is it mostly a hardware and generation technology issue, or is it also a market and regulatory adjustment that you see to ensure that the system will be operated more flexibly, that ancillary service, for example, can be provided in a more competitive way? Tell us what you think about this need for reform of the arrangement of the power system.
Yes, thank you very much, Dimitri. First of all, I'd like to say that in the Philippines, we have 600 megawatts of pump storage hydro already operating. And it has proven to be very reliable. And I would encourage Viet Nam to continue with its pump hydro program. Also, as far as flexibility of, say, coal and gas baseload assets, in the Philippines, it is my considered opinion that we already have an overcapacity of baseload. And because of that, our coal and gas baseload power plants are forced to cycle every day. Now, the result of that is not pleasant. We have random outages. It has led to red alerts, red, yellow alerts, grid alerts during the second quarter of the year, which is the peak of the grid. So I think that while there is a theoretical flexibility in existing coal and gas assets, the reality is in the Philippines, we've experienced difficulties with random outages. Finally, on new assets for grid flexibility, there is a project in the Philippines, over a gigawatt of pump storage hydro. There are battery energy storage installations already in our transmission development plan. I think relatively those are small and would have to be ramped up to improve ancillary service. We have another market for ancillary services, the ancillary service procurement plan. Also, the reserve market plan has been put in place, has been, because of the high prices, has been shut down, and is now, my understanding, is back in place. So I think we're trying to figure out in our system which would be practical and worthwhile. And I think there is a need for all countries here to collaborate precisely to find out which of those solutions are most applicable to our part of the world and, to the systems that we have in store.
Thanks a lot, Bert. The Philippines somehow stand out, right? Because in the sense that the liberalization has started much before all the question of renewable energy integration, but now we realize that a very flexible power system with different market segments can actually be a powerhouse to integrate those renewables. But you also mentioned this question of the reserve market. And you said, okay, it is also subject to policy risk of being, a change depending on whatever priority cost increase being the driver to put the instrument under a hold for a while. What do you think specifically on this question of adequacy? Because you also mentioned that there is actually an overcapacity in the Philippines. What is this reserve market in the coming years going to be developed? Which role is it expected to play? And more globally, the role of market in general to provide, an adequate and secure provision of electricity at low cost for all consumers. Is this market paradigm still so important and meaningful for the Philippines?
Yes, I sincerely believe it is. It is installed. We have to operate it and to trust it. The problem is, our leaders expect that when markets work, prices are low. That's not the case. When markets work, prices are high so that appropriate adjustments in operations and investments can be made. So I think we have to learn to trust the market, in this particular case, the reserve market. Yes, prices will be high at those times when we need the prices to be high so that the capacities that can deliver those reserve capacities will be made available. So trust the market, ride through the difficult situations. I think what we'll find is the market not only is the solution because it provides us with the capacities that we need when there are disruptive events, but also long term, the markets provide the investment climate needed for proper capacities to be chosen and to be deployed into our system. So I would rather trust the market, and I think it can be quite challenging for our political leaders, but that has, that is something that I hope they would learn to trust and use to our advantage, because the reserve market exists.
Thanks a lot, Bert. Trust the market. Chitra, let's go back to Indonesia, which is probably in the spectrum in terms of market liberalization, probably the further away you can imagine from the Philippine case. You also mentioned earlier the question of flexible retrofits in coal power plants. Even though the share of variable renewables is very low in Indonesia, there is discussion apparently ongoing on this question. So what is your take on this? Not necessarily only on the role of market, but how to bring investment in flexibility in the Indonesian power system to actually accommodate for further growth in variable renewable in the future. It's not probably a priority for now, but also in terms of ancillary service, reserve margins, reserve markets, this may become a priority in the future. What is your take? What is the view from Indonesia?
Yeah, I guess before we reach the discourse on flexibility, it is very much important to understand that Indonesia has mandated a coal phase out through a presidential decree that there will be no new coal power plant to be built. And the early retirement must start soon, and unless it is for a captive power plant, which is for industrial areas, then yeah, no more coal plants to be built unless it's already signed the PPA. So right now, the discussion is pretty much centered on how this mandate should manifest, because we have heard talk about early retirement of coal power plants since 2020, with the energy transition mechanism, and then under the Just Energy Transition Partnership, which also looking to finance the coal phase out. Because only with that, then more renewables can come to Indonesia's power system. And because our renewable energy, especially the variable one, is still very much low, then the how to say this, flexibility or renegotiation of the coal power plant contract is put on the second priorities after the coal phase out or coal phase down. And if we see about the manifestation of that presidential decree is that right now the government is in the progress of making a clear pathway or roadmap for coal power plant phase out. The target should be around 8.2 gigawatt until 2030, which is not that low, but also not as high. It is quite difficult for the government to find a suitable financing mechanism for that, because then we need to find a concessional loan or blended financing or even international climate funding to make sure that all the early retired coal power plants can follow the pathway of the early retirement. And talking about the flexible thermal coal power plant, so we have a technical study on how Indonesia can do a flexible thermal power plant scheme. Is that it should follow the first rule that coal phase out should be the first priority, and then we talk about the remaining coal power plant to be retrofitted or to operate flexibly, and that requires a really strong renegotiation of the PPA, which might require a new ministerial regulation. It means that the process of renegotiating the contract will be a long process and probably painful as well. And about 1/3 of Indonesia coal power plants are of foreign direct investment. So apart from renegotiating the clauses in the contract, it means that there is a certain international law that needs to be compensated, and it will add to more compensation coming in, meaning more financial requirements for the flexibility and also the coal phase.
Thanks a lot, Chitra. On this last point, on the renegotiation of the PPA, do you think there is a technical potential for operating the coal power plant more flexibly? So it's really only basically an incentive which is missing. I mean, even though there is no need yet to make them run more flexibly. And more globally, if we enter into a discussion regarding flexibilization of the coal assets, isn't it a risk that the power plants will, I mean, investment will come in the power plants, right, to make it more maybe flexible, and with the risk of keeping this power plant longer in the system? Don't you see a risk of basically conflicting interests, basically between the retrofit for flexibilization versus the retirement of the coal assets?
Yeah, that's why the discourse right now is much more centered on the coal phase out first, meaning we need to retire several of the coal power plants, and then we can talk about retrofitting the remaining coal power plants. But this is all also depends on how the government see which one is more feasible in terms of incentive and support given, especially for financial and fiscal incentive, or even some kind of tax break, etc., non-fiscal incentive that could be given to independent power producer to renegotiate the contract terms. And I would like to also to point out that for captive power plant, it is much more difficult then for the government to touch them, in a sense, because they're not under the mandate for coal phase out, and it's even more harder to insert variable renewable energy into the process because they're very much heavy on energy, and it's difficult to find suitable renewable energy potential to replace the coal.
Yes, thanks a lot, Chitra, for this complex discussion ongoing also in the context of the JETP discussion. We have 5 more minutes about, I realize this discussion is very rich and we could have it longer, but let's move to Thailand again, because Pim Supa, you mentioned the role of the gas assets in the current system. But if you look at the PDP on the discussion, gas is still expected to play a pretty significant role, right? I think 40% by 2035 or 38. How do you see the role of long-term role of gas in the power generation in Thailand, while meeting the objective of affordability, clean power and secure electricity generation?
Thank you, Dimitri. As Thailand want to transit to its energy mix, but as you already seen, the PDP gas still play a key role in balancing the grid, while we also want to phase down coal and also increase the renewable. The latest PDP target like 40% share for gas by 2037, which also present both challenges and opportunity for a cleaner and more secure system. I think as I already mentioned about the gas grid, a critical shift would be treat gas as a flexible backup rather than the base load. Revisiting gas contract to remove the rigid of minimum take obligations and focus on capacity payment would allow gas plant to adjust output based on renewable availabilities and also support the VIE integration more efficiently. And we already mentioned, as we talk about the coal, in Thailand, we also have phased down coal. And we only have the one coal power plant, like in Myanmar, in Chiang Mai province, in the northern part. And additionally, as we reorganize the coal assets, there also opportunity to create a more adaptive system. Part of the coal fleet would be repurposed to provide strategic reserve and maintain the energy security during the demand peak or low renewable output. This would reduce overcapacity risks and also a more balanced transition away for fossil fuels. And in conclude, I would say that while still remain major players in Thailand energy mix, and we need to redefine the role to support them, especially the VIE, because Thailand has very huge potential for solar. We need to leverage the strategic reserve within the coal fleet, the gas fleet, and also build out the flexibility focused market would ensure Thailand in order to meet our clean energy goal.
Thanks a lot, Phimsupha. Let me bring you to a last question, which will be the same for all of you, a closing remark. And I will start with you, Sitra. I know it's unfair. I put you last at the beginning and I put you first. You have heard your colleagues from other countries in the region. Is there anything which you have heard today in this discussion that you think could be interesting case from neighboring countries, could be applied in the discussion in Indonesia? Any mechanism which has been discussed in the Philippines, Indonesia, in Thailand or in Vietnam, or any policy discussion or instrument that you think could be worth to look at for the Indonesian context? And this question will be asked to all of you, so you can think about this already now.
Yeah, I think in terms of Indonesia's energy system landscape, it is very much important to boost our commitment and target for renewable energy without actually lowering the target. So we would like to call on our new government to restate the ambitious target for renewable energy and energy transition, and at the same time provide a lot of support, not just financing and regulatory support, but also on the technical and the procurement side. We can always learn from Thailand or Vietnam on how competitive procurement and long-term planning can benefit the country well, especially to reduce costs and help also in the long-term planning for upgrading and increasing the reliability of the system. And the third one that I would like to say is that, I think Indonesia right now is at the pivotal moment. So unless we do something now, we will not achieve our target by 2025 and not even peaking our emission by 2030.
Thanks a lot, Chitra. So long-term commitment and visibility and ambitious but realistic targets. Bert, what do you take from other countries' example that could be applied to Indonesia, to the Philippines?
Well, I'd like to actually cite the study presented by Ernst on renegotiation. Normally, in a market system, you don't want to renegotiate because it lessens credibility of the market. But I think as renegotiation, quote unquote, becomes practice in other ASEAN countries, it gives us the opportunity in the Philippines to try to look at the same strategic position. I think that in our case, maybe it's not renegotiation per se, but re-examination of existing provisions that may open certain provisions to, let's say, recalibration I would call it, because that means that there are provisions at the start of the contracting period that are not applicable now anymore. And that may reopen some of these provisions to enable a smoother transition to renewables, a smoother phasing out of the coal assets, the gas assets that we have in mind. So I would be very, very careful in calling it renegotiation, but that gives us, I think, an opportunity to reopen certain contract provisions in our existing contracts.
Thanks a lot, Bert. Very, very good points, and on the messaging also. And it has probably to do with the context or contact more globally in the framework of the ASEAN +3, so with Japan and Korea, which are important actually investor in this technology. So, but a very tricky point to address. Thuy, to you, what have you learned from today's discussion that could be applied to the Vietnam context?
Yes, thank you very much for insightful discussion already taking place. Actually, in terms of Vietnam, we have a lot to learn from other countries. We are in the earliest stage of procurement process, which is already implemented successfully in Thailand and Philippines. And we also have in the process to open the market, to have the competitive fully wholesale market, which is with the introduction of DPPA is in early stage also. So I think to improve the flexibility of the grid and to the capacity to deployment of the renewable energy, the idea to introduction of the ancillary service is also very important to the grid. Build up a very support backup storage system for the grid is also very wonderful that we are trying to do, but I think it will take time and a lot of money. And yes, and
thanks,
also
Thuy. I interrupt you because we're really running out of time, and you have already a lot of good points there. And so allow me just to move then finally to the last words to Pim Supa. Thanks, Thuy. Pim Supa, same question for you. You have 20 seconds. What inspired you from what you heard?
Yeah, I mean, we have similar situations, and I think like we can learn each other. Like for example, in Thailand, we are in the early stage, like for like direct PPA and a third-party access, and also we aim to have a more competitive market. I think for this report, I think we can learn each other and taking the lessons. And also, I would like to invite everyone to engage this report and today our report launch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pim Supa. And I also have to mention that you have been one of the authors of the report, so specifically thanks to you. Again, thanks to everyone. I think it was a very rich discussion. We are slightly actually behind schedule, so I'm closing here the panel discussion, and I want to thank you all for this. I also would like to thank everyone which was behind the curtain, and especially Grace and Christine. You played an important role in bringing this running smoothly. So I thank you very much for that. Also to bring the question from the audience in the panel discussion. I hope I managed this more or less, and that all of you, the audience, have been having your answers to the question you raised.